after telling you about perovskite oxides, we come to the important class of materials, which is high temperature superconductors. This is a very important class of superconductors, and actually, the discovery of high temperature superconductivity also led to the Nobel Prize in 1987. So, if I want to recount the Nobel Prizes which have come in superconductivity, it was Camerlingon's and discovery of superconductivity in mercury. So that was one of them. Then it was vortices and high temperature superconductors. Basically, the Abrikosov state, which went to Alexei Abrikosov. Prior to that, of course, it was the BCS theory for BCS discovery of the BCS theory for superconductivity to Bardeen, Cooper, and Schrieffer. There was a Nobel Prize given to Josephson for the discovery of the Josephson junction effect, and of course in materials for the discovery of high temperature superconductivity and the physics of high temperature superconductors. It went to Alexander Mueller and George Besnard for discovery of the high temperature superconductivity in these high temperature class of materials. So these were the major Nobel prizes which went. These were the Nobel prizes which went in the area of superconductivity, and one of them went to high temperature superconductor discovery. And so it is not possible not to discuss this very important class of materials. So, if we come to this slide, then I would like to show you that basically the high temperature superconductors, okay, perovskites, you can start with a parent compound which is like La2CuO4. This is typically an antiferromagnetic insulator, non-superconducting. And then what you start doing is that at this lanthanum site, you start doping it with barium or strontium. Okay, so you take out a little bit of lanthanum from each unit cell and you start doping it with barium or strontium, and the moment you start doing that beyond a certain doping concentration, suddenly superconductivity emerges inside the material, and they found that the material becomes superconducting and the transition temperature at a certain level of doping peaked at 30 Kelvin. As you increase the doping concentration, the superconducting transition temperature keeps on increasing until it reaches a maximum. Beyond that concentration of doping, if you still keep on doping with say barium or strontium, then again after the beyond that particular threshold limit, the TC again goes down. So there will be a dome-like feature. I'll come to that. But you see that Bernard-Zermüller, by taking this parent antiferromagnetic insulator of lanthanum copper oxide and by doping it, just merely by doping it with this material, they suddenly discovered a very high transition temperature. Subsequently, there was this discovery of the 123 compound, yttrium barium copper oxide, YbCO, which has a TC of 90 Kelvin, 90 to 100 Kelvin. Okay, so and then there was the BISCO, bismuth, strontium, calcium, copper oxide, which is this material. Okay, and which has a TC of around 90 Kelvin. This is called as 2212 because the stoichiometry of bismuth is 2, strontium is 2, calcium is 1, and copper is 2. Okay, there is also another material called BISCO, but it has a stoichiometry of 2223 compound. Okay, and that has a TC of close to 110 Kelvin. Okay, not under pressure, just naturally that material has a high superconducting transition temperature. So with the discovery of this new set of materials, it became immediately possible to work with them at liquid nitrogen temperature, which was a drastic improvement because liquid nitrogen is much easier to produce, is much cheaper, and so it became possible that now people started seeing important possibilities for technological advancement using these high temperature superconductors. So This is where the importance lay, and the prize actually was given to Bednorz and Mueller for the discovery of this class of materials. This class of materials is still intriguing. It is still a very complex phenomena of how superconductivity arises in this system is still not understood, and this material still continues to be studied. Okay, so I would like to tell you a little bit about the mysteries of this material without getting into too much of details. Those are the things that you will have to work out and you will have to learn if you are interested in this area, in the area of high temperature superconductors and superconductivity in high temperature superconductors. You will have to read a lot more. I would just like to tell you a little bit about the physics of these high temperature superconductors, which is quite interesting. So, for example, you have different class of these ceramic compounds, these copper oxide based compounds. What is uniform along for all of them is that you see that they have copper and oxygen. Okay, so this is like lanthanum 1.85, strontium 0.15. So in La2CuO4, if you replace a little bit of lanthanum with this strontium, then you start getting a Tc of around 39 Kelvin. YbCO, yttrium barium copper oxide with barium doping, has this 92 Kelvin transition temperature. Then 84 to 100 Kelvin is in this material. Depending on also the oxygen concentration, you can vary the superconducting transition temperature. So you have 2212 and 2223 in these materials. And then there is a whole mercury based high temperature superconductors. You also have these mercury based high temperature superconductors, neodymium, cerium, copper oxide, and so there are this different whole class of materials of this thing. All of them are roughly similar structurally. They have some similarities in their structure, which I'll come to. Okay, but these are the whole class of ceramic superconductors, and with high transition temperatures. So what is the basic structural, the formula unit, okay, for these systems is AME2Ca calcium, which is N minus 1, CuNO 2N plus M plus 2 plus Y. Okay, Y is slightly variable. You can vary the oxygen concentration. Okay, and you can improve the Tc slightly. Okay, so CuO, of course, CuO2 is a common thing which is present in all these materials. This is the general formula. Okay, so there are copper oxide stacks. So there are two-dimensional planes of copper oxide which are present in this material. For example, these blue sheets that you see here are copper oxide sheets. So uniformly you will see in these materials the presence of these copper oxide sheets which are present in this material. Okay, and for example, here you can see in this that there are these two sheets which periodically repeat. There can be only one sheet which will repeat, or there can be two sheets. Sometimes there are three of these copper oxide sheets which are repeating periodically inside the structure. As you build up the structure, there is periodic repetition of these copper oxide planes. Okay, but these are typically two-dimensional copper oxide planes which are present inside the material, and they have an important physics also to play. Okay, which I will come to. I'll just indicate as we go along. The and then between the copper oxide planes you have all the other types of materials. For example, you have an arbitrary oxide A, where A can be Bi, Pb, Ti, mercury, Au, copper, calcium, Al, gallium. Okay, so you can have various sorts of these oxides which are present on either end, and you also have this E. Okay, which is a rare earth alkaline oxide, which can be barium or strontium. Usually this is the material, okay, in which so you can take this barium and strontium oxides. Okay, so here you have the arbitrary oxide layer which is shown in red, followed by a layer of EuO. Then you have a copper oxide, and in between these two copper oxide you have the calcium ion which is present, and then again you have the rare earth oxide layer, and then arbitrary oxide layer, rare earth oxide layer, then copper oxide with calcium in between, and then the whole thing repeats itself. Okay, so this entire structure forms the general structure of your uh, high temperature superconductor. Okay, so if I want to look at it in a very gross way, okay, where I can actually merge this AOX and EOX, then the arbitrary oxide and the rare earth oxide, then I can think of the structure basically as having copper oxide planes, and in this copper oxide planes I will have these blocks, and between these copper oxide planes I have these blocks which have the arbitrary oxide and the rare earth oxide. Okay, so in these blocks, when I dope it with these rare earth inside these blocks, that is when you will find that there is a charge doping which is created inside the system, and this charge doping is actually crucial for creating superconductivity inside these materials. Okay, I'll come to that just in a moment, but the important aspect of this discussion is that you have basically this two-dimensional copper oxide layer with blocks in between. It's almost like a sandwich structure where you have these copper oxide layers sandwiched in between. You have the arbitrary oxide and the rare earth oxides which are present in between, and calcium also is there in this layer. Okay, so this is how you construct your structure. Now typically, for example, I had shown you that you have lanthanum copper oxide, and then this lanthanum copper oxide is this La2CuO4, which I had told you is a parent compound. This parent compound is an antiferromagnetic insulator. So here what is shown here, and then what you do is that you take lanthanum La2, it is La2CuO4, 2 minus X, say strontium X, and CuO4. Okay, so you start varying the concentration. This could also be barium. Okay, and you start varying the concentration of this doping, and as you start varying the concentration of doping, okay, so what is plotted out here is the temperature, and here is the doping concentration on this axis. Okay, and what you see is that this is what this line represents is the Néel temperature, because this is an antiferromagnet. It has a Néel temperature. So what is plotted out here is the Néel temperature. So as you increase the doping concentration, what you find is that the Néel temperature of this parent compound, first it starts decreasing, which means that the long range order in the in your high temperature superconductor is slowly shrinking, is actually decreasing, or the ordering temperature is also going to lower and lower temperature as you're doping the system. Okay, and as beyond a certain doping concentration, you find that the system loses its long range antiferromagnetic order. Okay, now once it loses this antiferromagnetic order, now below this line it is an antiferromagnetic insulator as it is shown here. Now between this, okay, in a certain doping range, the system behaves like a very strange metal. Okay, here the material is completely not like that of an ordinary metal, but it has linear temperature, the resistivity depends linearly on temperature, and various other unusual features which happen in this regime, where the material is neither an antiferromagnetic insulator nor superconducting, but it is a strange metal. Okay, this area has recently become very interesting and important for investigations because of these unusual properties this material exhibits in this doping interval. Now as you continue to dope the system, you find that there is a superconducting dome starts to appear, that beyond this threshold doping, this is 0.1 or about 10% of the dopant which has been introduced. This is 0.05, so about 6-7% onwards, you start seeing that there is a weak increase in superconducting transition. So that superconducting transition starts to appear, and it increases as you increase the doping concentration, the doping concentration, the superconducting transition increases, it reaches a peak, and beyond this peak again it starts decreasing. So if you cross around 17% of doping, then you find that beyond this percentage the superconducting transition again starts decreasing. So this is the typical characteristic phase diagram of temperature versus doping that you will see in high temperature superconductors. That it begins off as an antiferromagnetic insulator, you suppress the long range antiferromagnetic order and you get a strange metallic phase, and then there is a superconducting dome. Whatever this is called the superconducting dome, and this is characteristic of all high TC superconductors. Now if you are measuring, now once you enter the superconducting state, you will see a gap in the density of states. The gap is not typically like that of a normal BCS like high temperature superconductor. It is slightly different, but nonetheless for the moment let's not get into all those details. The gap is there is a gap in the density of states, just like you expect for any superconductor. There is a gap in the density of states once you enter into the superconducting state. But as you, if you were to cross this density, if you were able to cross this superconducting dome and you were to continue measuring the density of states, namely below 40 less than Tc, you will have a gap in the density of states. This is the density of states as a function of energy. So around the Fermi energy, there is a gap in the density of states, which you will see. Okay, if you are deep in the superconducting state. However, if you go above the if you go at a temperature which is above the superconducting transition, people have found that there is a still weak gap which is surviving at T greater than Tc. So if I have the density of states measured as a function of energy, this is your Fermi energy, then for T less than Tc you have a nice well formed gap. This is T less than Tc. But even for T greater than Tc, you will find that there is a weak gap surviving which slowly decreases until it completely disappears at very high temperature. Okay, so for this value of doping, at this value of doping, even if you cross the superconducting transition, one finds that up to a certain temperature window, up to this region, there is a weak gap which is present, and only above this temperature the gap disappears. You can go at a different doping and you will find that this range increases, this range. So even above the superconducting state, very strangely over a certain window, you see something like a gap in the density of state still surviving in these superconductors, and this is called as the pseudo gap regime. Namely, even well above, even at T greater than Tc, well above the superconducting transition temperature, there is an evidence of some sort of pairing, some sort of gap in the density, single particle density of states, which survives up to well above Tc. And here it is thought that there are fluctuating Cooper pairs which are, it is like a superconducting puddles, if I may say, that there are superconducting puddles which are generated, microscopic superconducting puddles which are present inside the system, but these puddles are not phase coherent. You know that a superconducting state is a macroscopic quantum state where the entire system behaves in unison. Everything is in phase. Okay. Here in the pseudo gap regime, one believes that there are microscopic superconducting puddles which are not having identical phase. They have some sort of pairing, a weak pairing which is present, which can survive up to pretty high temperatures, but this puddle is not correlated with this puddle. These puddles are behaving separately from each other. They have different phases from each other, but microscopically still you have some superconductivity remaining in this region. So the pseudo gap phase is a very interesting regime for superconductivity, and there has been a lot of work which has gone into trying to understand the pseudo gap phase, because you can see that this pseudo gap phase can actually survive up to very high temperatures, even reaching up to room temperature. So you don't have phase coherence in this regime, namely you don't have that you can have dissipationless flow of current in this regime, but nonetheless there are some Cooper pairs which are still present. They are locally present, but globally or macroscopically there is no Cooper pairs or a uniform density of Cooper pair which are all in phase with each other. That does not exist. So the pseudo gap phase is a very interesting aspect of high temperature superconductors. Even the shape of the gap which is present below Tc in high temperature superconductors is very unusual, is very novel, and maybe I will say a little bit more about it when we discuss BCS theory and about the nature of the superconducting gap. So this was about a little bit about high temperature superconductors, and let me tell very briefly a bit of the physics of high temperature superconductors, namely what is the role of this doping, okay, and how does it actually, what does doping do to the system. Now, from what one understands, and here I will go a little bit quickly, you will have to read more about it, is that the superconductivity basically emerges in the copper oxide planes, okay, and the entire physics is related to the behavior of charges in this copper oxide planes, and how that is influenced by the sandwich in between. That is going to be the topic of discussion of the next lecture.